This is the Sports Bash Warm-Up with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Josh Hennig.
This is the best shape Sean's been in his life. He's just in tremendous football shape. But if he gets hurt again and Alshad's not ready for the early portion of the season, it's Marquise Goodwin's the next guy up. I mean, that's it. Obviously, Rager will start opposite Deshaun. At least that's their plan as of now. Arcega-Whiteside, I'm told he's totally healthy. He's over his foot injury. It's healed months ago. But he didn't contribute last year. Marquise Goodwin is new. He has not worked with Carson. They don't have many options. Now, Greg Ward, I've been asked about this. I'll address it. He would not play on the outside on any circumstance. He's a slot receiver. He's a short area, sure-handed, good route runner, but cannot play on the outside. He's not fast enough.
That was Adam Kaplan, NFL Insider, yesterday on the Sports Batches Football at 4 on 97.3 ESPN every day at 4 o'clock. Sports Bash has all the guys from InsideTheBurst.com. Yesterday was Adam Kaplan. And it follows up on our conversation from yesterday about the Eagles' offense. What could it look like? We'll get into all that coming up here on the show today on 97.3 ESPN. Joining me coming up at 1:25, Emory Hunt, former college football running back, currently NFL and college football analyst and draft guru, will join us coming up at 1:25. What about Miles Sanders? What about this Eagles' offense? You heard Adam Kaplan right there talk about it, though. The Eagles' wide receiver situation is very intriguing because if there are injuries, and every year it feels like there are injuries with the Eagles at some position or another, what happens next? Who fills the void? Who steps up? And last year we saw what happened when you had zero depth at the wide receiver position. You were stuck with playing a tight end at wide receiver positions in Josh Perkins. You had to bring in a guy like Deontay Burnett, a guy who hadn't basically been with the team the entire year. Guys like Robert Davis basically being drug out there, hopefully to just catch a ball here and there. And the Eagles ended the season last year with their top three pass catchers being two tight ends and a running back. So the wide receiver position is going to have a major impact on the Eagles this coming year. Because if these guys can stay healthy, Deshaun Jackson, Jalen Reagor, Greg Ward, you have an opportunity to go out there and have an explosive offense. But if those guys are not healthy, then you have some serious questions. Serious questions about what happens to the Eagles. And this was Adam Kaplan explaining basically who he expects to be the order of the depth chart and who actually to make the team this upcoming season.
But really, when you clear this all out, let's just assume Jeffrey won't be ready for week one. We don't know when he'll be ready. It's going to be Jackson, Rager, Arcega-Whiteside, Goodwin, and Greg Ward. There's your five. Do they keep six? Well, if they keep six, it could be anybody. It could be Watkins. It could be Robert Davis, who was there last year. Deontay Burnett, who had to play. It could be Shelton Gibson, who, by the way, could flat out fly, but has had trouble staying with the team. So right now, I would say five receivers with the upside of six.
So what you're basically looking at, most likely, is a team with a wide receiver core that is it improved on last year? Sure. But maybe it's not as deep as we would like because you're talking about Deshaun Jackson, Jalen Reagor, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Greg Ward, and Marquise Goodwin, and the possibility of maybe a sixth guy, whether that be one of maybe five people making that sixth spot, depending on how they construct the roster at other positions. So with that being said, it only emphasizes the importance of Miles Sanders in this offense. As we were talking about yesterday, Miles Sanders is going to be the team's feature back. He is going to be a primary catalyst of the offense this upcoming season. And part of the reason why he has to be the catalyst is similar to what happened years ago with the Eagles a major reason why Brian Westbrook was the player he was for the Eagles was because he was playing with guys like Todd Pigston and Reggie Brown. It's not like the Eagles had some elite wide receivers out there, aside from the 1 year that Terrell Owens was with Donovan McNabb. But Ryan Westbrook's ability to run the ball and catch the ball was a major part of that offense. And then years later, when LaShawn McCoy came in, he was a major back in the Eagles offense. Yeah, they had Deshaun Jackson. Yeah, they had Jeremy Maclin, but neither one of those guys were quote-unquote possession receivers. So when the Eagles went out there, sometimes they used either the tight end or LaShawn McCoy in the underneath areas as Jackson and Maclin cleared out the rest of the defense in the secondary. So when you look at the Eagles now, Deshaun Jackson, okay, he's in the best shape of his life. But even if he is, I don't think Deshaun Jackson's going to lead the team in targets. He's probably not even going to be second at this point. The Eagles are going to have Zach Ertz. They're going to have Jalen Reagor. They're going to have Dallas Goedert. They're going to have Deshaun Jackson. They're going to have Miles Sanders. You have a lot of players who are all going to be vying for pass targets, as Adam Kaplan explained yesterday on the Sports Bash.
It'll be Ertz is 1. Reagor should be 2. Then it's probably going to be Deshaun or Dallas Goedert. I'm telling you, Mike, we've not talked about him probably the entire offseason. He is going to be heavily involved in their offense. We probably should be talking about him more. They love him. And, unfortunately, Goddard, I'm told, suffered a calf injury the second day of training camp, and he was never right till midseason. Remember, he had the setback in warm-ups in week 2 against Atlanta. But he's going to be a major factor this season.
Another guy that we haven't talked too much about, Dallas Goedert. So while the Eagles may not have an Amari Cooper type receiver, they may not have a receiver who's a clear-cut number 1 receiver. The Eagles are adapting their offense and say, look, we have Zach Ertz, we have Dallas Goedert, we have Miles Sanders, and if our receivers can stay healthy, the receivers that we have are complementary to the 2 tight ends and the running back. Text board is open at 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. Again, Emory Hunt will join us coming up at 125 here, talking about more about the Eagles' offense on 97.3 ESPN. Text board 609-403-0973. So when you think about the Eagles, you have to realize their offense is not a traditionally built offense, but frankly, that's kind of the operating mold of Andy Reid and Doug Peterson. Look at what the Chiefs won the Super Bowl with. Yeah, they had Patrick Mahomes, but who was he throwing to? He was throwing to one of the best receiving tight ends in the NFL, in Travis Kelce. He was throwing to a deep threat in Tyreek Hill, and a guy who's been inconsistent as a first-round pick in Sammy Watkins. And they had cycled through a few different running backs last season for the Chiefs. And then this year, they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the LSU running back who fits more so the mold of the LaShawn McCoy-type player that Andy Reid wants from a running back in his offense. But there was not a traditional number 1 receiver, because one of the things we forget about in the NFL is that being able to win a Super Bowl is less dependent on your wide receiver than it is in other positions. You look around the NFL, Julio Jones, Mike Evans, Amari Cooper. You look at guys like DeAndre Hopkins, guys like Keenan Allen. What do all those guys have in common? They got no rings. They're not champions. The only championships on their resume is the fantasy football league that you drafted and put them on. The number 1 wide receiver, the elite receiver, the top-tier guys are not winning championships year in and year out. And it's not a negative against them, but there is something to be said for the fact that if your offense is constructed around an entire unit and not just 1 or 2 players, you have the opportunity to contend for a championship. Mike Thomas, since he got to New Orleans, hasn't gotten New Orleans any closer back to the Super Bowl. They've been to the playoffs, but they haven't been getting to the Super Bowl each and every year. They got to a conference championship game, but no Super Bowl appearance. Julio Jones got to one Super Bowl, and his team choked in the big game, and he lost. The rest of the teams that usually get to the big game, they're getting there because they have a balanced offense. What did the Eagles have in 2017? A balanced offense and a defense that came up clutch in the postseason. The defense came up clutch in the Vikings game. It came up big in the Falcons game. It got them in the big game. And then they had the offensive balance between the tight end, the running back, and the wide receivers to win the game. And in some ways, the Eagles are attempting to replicate part of that formula in 2020. The Eagles understand the importance of having a running back like Miles Sanders to open up the rest of the offense. And then opening up the rest of the offense also opens up for Miles Sanders because you have the speed receivers like Deshaun Jackson. You have the guy who can do multiple different things in the offense like Jalen Reagor. You have Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, who were already two of your top receivers last year. So while we may have concerns with the Eagles' depth and we may have concerns about what we can expect from the Eagles at the wide receiver position, we have to understand that this team is not traditionally built. This is not a team that was built from the outside in. It's a team that's built from the inside out. They built up the offensive line. They spent the second-round pick on the running back. They have the tight ends. Then they added wide receivers after the fact. And I think that's why some people may look at the Eagles and say, man, I don't know how good that offense can be. But they're overlooking the functionality of the offense. 609-403-0973 is text board to get on the conversation here on 97.3 ESPN. And when you look around the NFC, I think one of the things that gets overlooked is the fact that around the league and around the conference, you're seeing that a lot of teams who improved this offseason, they maybe only improved at one or two positions, but they didn't improve at multiple positions. And I think that's kind of where my mind personally goes when it comes to the Eagles. If you're competing with a team like the Saints, are kind of the same team as they were last year. When you look at a team like the Falcons, you basically swapped out Devonta Freeman for Todd Gurley. It's kind of the same. It's kind of only difference is that Gurley is arguably a better in between the tackles runner than Devonta Freeman, and Gurley probably has a bit of a higher upside in terms of what he can do if he's fully healthy for a 16-game season than Devonta Freeman. He's a slight upgrade, but they both have had injury questions over the last couple of years. Yeah, the Tampa Bay Bucks added Tom Brady. Yeah, the Tampa Bay Bucks look a lot better on paper this year with Gronk as well, but as I mentioned to you guys earlier in the week, if you think Gronk is going to be Pat's Gronk from a couple of years ago, you're going to be mistaken because, number one, he hasn't played football in over a year. So he's not going to come out of the gate 100% as he was before. It might take him a little bit of time to be all he can be. I don't think you're going to see the best of Gronk week one. It might be a couple weeks before you see him round in the form. And even then, we don't even know what a Gronk a year plus removed from football and a guy who is a little older than he used to be. Remember, he lost a bunch of weight in the offseason when he was not training for football. Now he's retraining for football. He did the whole WWE stint. And even next to a lot of those guys, he looked a little small. He didn't look as monster Gronk as he had in the past in the NFL. And by the way, even when he played in the NFL, he had 200 pads on his body. The armor, the shoulder pads. He had the biggest pads he could find out there. So who's to really say what Gronk is going to be when he returns for the Buccaneers? And I know what I'm getting from Brady. I know what I'm getting from Mike Evans. I know what I'm getting from Godwin and the rest of that team. But even the Bucs don't have the greatest offensive line or running back situation. Again, looking around the NFC, you look at a guy like DeAndre Hopkins going to the Cardinals. Great upgrade for the Cardinals offense, but it doesn't do too much to fix some of their offensive line and defensive questions going into the offseason. The Rams are going to be very interesting because no more Todd Gurley there. They're totally changing some of the structure of how they formulate that offense. Jared Goff looked like he regressed a little bit last year. I'm very curious to see what that team looks like. The 49ers, they're arguably a little better than they were last year. Adding Trent Richardson is going to be interesting because he hasn't played in a little while. But I would assume that Trent Richardson, because he's a professional, has stayed in shape and is going to go out there and have an impact on the offensive line for the 49ers. But it's a bit of a trade-off. Staley retires, Williams comes in. It's not exactly a massive upgrade. The Seahawks are mostly the same team as they were last year. Okay, they have Carlos Hyde instead of Marshawn Lynch. Is it really even an upgrade? I'm not even 100% sure. You still have Chris Carson there. You still have, a bunch of guys coming off of injuries like Penny and Carson and the other guys. So I guess Hyde's going to get a lot of touches, but I don't know how much of an upgrade he is over Marshawn Lynch. The Vikings, they traded Stephon Diggs and they drafted Justin Jefferson. And frankly, I have no idea what that means, especially considering that Dalvin Cook looks like he's going to hold out for a better contract, according to reports. Questions about the Vikings. The Packers did nothing to upgrade a team around Aaron Rodgers, and they drafted a quarterback. That's going to be a soap opera this year. Nick Foles is in Chicago, but even if Nick Foles is behind center for the Bears instead of Mitch Trubisky, how much better are the Bears? There's a lot of questions about the offensive personnel around the quarterback going into 2020. So, again, you look around the NFC, you realize that outside of a handful of teams, there's not a bunch of teams that had massive upgrades or massive games from last year to this year, and that's where the Eagles can step up and have an impact, despite the fact that their team may look a little different than other teams. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. I'm not getting up here and saying the Eagles are one of the best offenses in the NFL, but I think that the running back in Miles Sanders has to be considered one of the top 10 dual-threat running backs in the league at minimum. And because he's a dual-threat running back, because he can do multiple things, it takes less pressure that would have been on Wentz and the receivers and allows him to take some of that responsibility along with Ertz and Goddard. And again, if you're, as Adam Kaplan said on Football at 4 on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN yesterday, if the Eagles' top pass target guys are Ertz, Rager, Djax, and Goddard, and then Sanders comes in rounding out the top 5, that's still a formidable set of weapons. We can't act like just because the Eagles don't have Adam Thielen or Amari Cooper or one of those top receivers doesn't mean the Eagles' offense can't score. When they won the Super Bowl, they were a top 5 offense, and it was Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, Torrey Smith, running back by committee, and a great offensive line. That's how the Eagles win. That's the formula. So don't think just because the Eagles don't have a guy like DeAndre Hopkins at receiver doesn't mean that they can't have a great year. Again, the text board is open, 609-403-0973. To get on the conversation, Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll be joined by Emory Hunt coming up in about 8 minutes. Talk more about the Eagles' offense. One more clip I wanted to play for you from Adam Kaplan, because he specifically talks about the fact that the Eagles do have a role for Jalen Reagor. And I think one of the things that gets overlooked about Reagor is people keep pointing out, well, look how he played in college, or, well, he had a bad quarterback in college, or his 40 time was different from the combine to his pro day. All these different things they point to, but yet one of the most important things in sports is how do you utilize who you actually have? And as Adam Kaplan pointed out on Football at 4 yesterday on the Sports Bash, the Eagles have a specific role already carved out for Jalen Reagor.
They have a role for him in mind. They have a plan for him. And what I'm told so far, by the way, is he's done really well in their sessions in terms of online teaching, obviously with the receivers coach, Aaron Moorhead. his learning and during the install, I'm told it's been really good. It's exactly what they thought it would be when they worked with him before the draft. So this is good. But again, until you get on the field, you really can't tell.
But at least the Eagles have a plan. And I think having a plan is half the battle. Having a plan for a talented athlete like Jalen Reagor is half the battle. So again, we may look at, well, they fired Groh and they brought in Rich Scangarello and Marty Morningweg, and they fired the wide receiver coach and they brought in Aaron Moorhead, and you look at the fact that they brought in Reagor and they traded for Goodwin and they already, J-Daw didn't play well. We know all that. But instead of looking at all of the negatives of it, want to look at the positives. And the positive is that this offense is actually built in a way that can be very efficient, very talented, and execute at the high level. And that should excite you as an Eagles fan. That should get you pumped up. You know, whether you love or hate Carson Wentz, whether you liked or didn't like the Jalen Reagor pick, the possibility of this offense getting back to what it was in 2017 is a big deal. And as I mentioned with Dave Weinberg on a Weinberg Wednesday this week, here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN, this is the first offseason Wentz isn't coming off an injury. The last two offseasons, he's come off of, first it was the knee injury from 2017 to 18, and then from 18 to 19, it was the broken back. So this is the first time in a couple of years that Wentz is coming into a season not coming off of a major injury. He doesn't have a broken back coming to recover from. He doesn't have a torn up knee to recover from. So when he's working out in the offseason, he's training with the receivers like he is in Texas right now, he's in a position to come into the season more prepared, more healthy. That's another positive for the Eagles. Coming up next on the Sports Bash, we'll get into more of the Eagles' offense and how it compares to the rest of the NFC with Emory Hunt coming up in about 4 minutes right here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you till 2 o'clock. And don't forget the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City. Josh Hennig back here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City. We'll talk more about the Eagles' offense, Miles Sanders, and more right now with Emory Hunt, college football, NFL analyst, draft guru. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. As all guests, he joins us right now on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Emory, how you doing on this Friday?
I'm doing fine, Josh. I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you jumping on. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because one of the conversations we've been having throughout the week is about Miles Sanders, the Eagles running back. And to me, one of the things that stands out about him is the fact that people overlook that he was the third wide receiver on the team last year in terms of catches and yards. He was a guy that was top 10 in the NFL in total yards. This is a guy who has already shown in just 11 starts in the NFL that he can be that multi-dimensional running back. So off top, I want to get your perspective on what do you think of Miles Sanders and what he can do in the NFL and in the Eagles offense?
Yeah, I think you hit on all of the key points. You look at Miles Sanders, and Eagles fans will appreciate this. You can easily envision Brian Westbrook and what he brought to the table under Andy Reid and that Eagles offense, a guy that was your quintessential dual threat in the backfield. Yes, he can run inside, run outside. He's a terrible matchup for linebackers because he's so quick and elusive. And also he can catch football deep down the field, not just your standard flares, flat screens, and swing routes. He's a true downfield threat in the passing game. So to me, he's the new age version of the Eagles' Brian Westbrook, and I think that's what they can expect for him to bring to the table now that he's going to be the full-fledged starter in the backfield.
You mentioned Brian Westbrook. You look back, though, when Westbrook was in Philadelphia, the Eagles have a better tight end now than they did back then. You could argue the Eagles have some better receivers now than they did back then. You know, back then you talk about guys like, Chad Lewis and L.J. Smith at tight end, and then receivers like Reggie Brown and Todd Pinkston. So if you think about it, if you have a player similar to Brian Westbrook but with a better supporting cast, shouldn't we expect more of this offense?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, when you have all those weapons around a player like Miles Sanders, maybe you don't have to expect him to do certain things. You don't have to put him in a situation where he's going to be the third leading receiver on the team. Maybe he takes a step back as far as that is concerned because they've added talent at wide receiver, and they're expecting guys to step up and take some of that workload off of Sanders so he can concentrate on being a really good tailback that also catches the football very well.
When you look at Miles Sanders also, I think one thing people overlook is the fact that he only really had 1 year to show out at Penn State because he was behind arguably the best running back in the NFL and Saquon Barkley. So what is Miles Sanders' ceiling in the NFL, Emory?
Well, I think because of, him last year, 2 years ago at Penn State being the full-time guy for the first time, last as with any rookie getting up to speed on the NFL, consistency of the NFL speed and athleticism and strength and the preparation that you need. Remember, college football players only playing about 13 games. That's an extra, 7 games in the NFL when you count preseason. So that's why you had that rookie wall. Plus, he was splitting time with Jordan Howard, and, he had his own injury issues, a little bit throughout the course of his rookie season. So all of that just kind of combined into what we saw last year. But now he's coming off of a season where he got reps. He's going to be the full-fledged starter. He's healthy going into the season, and we should see a lot of what we saw at Penn State from him.
Emory Hunt joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Again, make sure you're following him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan for all your NFL and college football analysis. Emory, so Miles Sanders, we know what he can do, but what about the rest of the offense? How does the rest of the offense complement him, and how does he complement what the other guys do?
Well, if you think about him being the third receiver on the team last year, that's a team that didn't have Jalen Reagor out of TCU, so you add him to the mix. You expect J.J. Arcega-Whiteside to take huge strides in year two. He's still a very good receiver, so you take some of the receiving options away from Sanders. And when you look at the offense, we talked about the tight end position. They're there. I think they're better at receiver than many people are giving them credit for. And when you add the fact that they got backs now that can, that don't need volume, that can be successful. We're talking about Sanders and Boston Scott, Corey Clement. Those are guys that don't need the volume of carries that a Jordan Howard needed to be successful. So yeah, they have a lot of good options on the offense. Now it's just up to Wentz to continue to play his game, play like he played the back end of the season, and for the offensive line to continue to be one of the stalwarts in the division as far as what they do is blocking is concerned. Obviously, a lot of eyes will be on Andre Dillard.
Emory, you mentioned Jalen Reagor. There's a lot of reports out there. The expectation is that Reagor would be the receiver opposite of Deshaun Jackson week one, and they'd have him in the X slot. So explain to the audience a little bit about what the responsibility of the X receiver is in an offense like Philadelphia.
Well, you're responsible for beating the team's top defensive back each and every week one-on-one. You have to be able to win those matchups. You got to be able to be good off the line of scrimmage. You have to be able to win, against bump press. And for a rookie, that's a tough ask, man. And so that's why you see a lot of rookies tend to either start slow at receiver or they move them inside to the slot or as a Z, which is a flanker. So that way you can put them in motion. You can kind of take away them having to get off bump press unless that's something that he excelled at in college. With Reagor, if he's going to be playing the X, that means they think highly of his ability at the line of scrimmage, and they also think of highly of his ability to win one-on-one against the team's number 1 or 1-8 type corner.
Do you think Reagor potentially, because he's being thrust in there so quickly, that he may be one of those guys who maybe starts a little slowly because we don't have the OTAs and the mini camps ahead of training camp this year?
Yeah, and again, you have to factor in all of that. Plus, you have to factor in playing a receiver at the NFL level is a lot different than playing it in the Big 12. In the Big 12, you're throwing a lot and you're seeing a lot of coverage and you're being asked to read coverage on the fly. But, you have to make those decisions a lot quicker because of the hash marks that are in the NFL. It's a lot closer. So things have to happen fast. The ball has to come out fast. The pressure comes quicker. And you have to make your decision as a receiver a lot quicker. So as soon as he can get up to speed on that part of the game, the mental speed of the game, then we know he can do what he can do physically because we saw it all throughout the course of his career at TCU.
Also, one thing that's been discussed as well is Greg Ward. Greg Ward obviously didn't get too much shine until the end of the year last year, and a lot of people expect him to be the primary slot receiver coming into this year. What do you think of Greg Ward, and what would be your expectations for him heading into 2020?
He's a great example of what happens when you allow guys to develop. Greg Ward, Shelton Gibson, former Eagle, then came back after he was, cut from the Browns or snatched off the Browns practice squad. You have those guys that you develop in-house that have grown into, contributors. And I think because he was able to contribute last year and came up big in a big way, his confidence is going to be through the roof. And he's another one to keep an eye on. I would also keep an eye on undrafted rookie Menashe Bailey out of Morgan State, another one that has upside, the athleticism to really take the top off of a defense and a catch and run type guy. So when the Eagles have shown that they're giving guys time to develop and work through their system, that's why I'm high on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside in year 2, because we've seen what this coaching staff can do with guys like Ward and guys like Gibson.
Now, you mentioned J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. A lot of Eagle fans are down on him because of last year, but the reports have come out this offseason that he was dealing with a lot of injuries last year, and now we know coming into 2020, there's a new wide receiver coach. They've made some adjustments on the coaching staff. So what can J.J. Arcega-Whiteside do for the Eagles in 2020?
He could be a lot like Alshon Jeffrey as far as being that high post player, the guy that you want to play, above the rim with inside the red zone, a lot like what he did at Stanford. And again, it's just an adjustment for a lot of receivers coming from the college level to the pro level, and how you get off bump press, how you are able to see the field in the constant changing picture. It's your pre-snap look won't be what your during the snap look is going to be. And a lot has to go into that. It's easier for a running back, easier for a lineman, as opposed to a receiver or a corner and quarterback. So I think you're going to see a guy that's going to play a lot like what he did with the Cardinals in college and, doing a great job inside the red zone and being a nice chain mover type receiver for this offense.
So with all that being said, we talked about the receivers, talked about different guys. How do the Eagles' offense compare to the rest of the offenses in the NFC?
Because you have to factor in, their head coach and what they do well. And, I'm a big fan of Doug Peterson and what he does. And I think they have a nice, well-oiled machine. They can match up against anybody. They got size. They have explosiveness. They have tight end depth. And the cool part is when you look at tight ends, teams don't have one, and the Eagles have two. And so that's already a matchup problem. It helps them out in the run game. They do a great job of blocking both those guys. And they got good backs that are interchangeable that can also catch the football. So it's an offense that provides a lot of versatility, a lot of athleticism. But if they want to play the big boy game, they can play the big boy game because they have the offensive line. They have those big receivers that can win above the rim. And they have a quarterback that's very tough to bring down to the pocket.
So with all that being said, then why do you think people are sometimes down on the Eagles? Because it feels like when people talk about the best offenses, especially in the NFC, it's Michael Thomas with the Saints, it's Julio Jones with the Falcons, Mike Evans with the Bucks. But the Eagles don't have that number one primary receiver. So do you need that number one primary receiver, or is it more important for a team to have balance on their offense?
I think it's more important for a team to be, healthy. And, when you're healthy and you're out there consistently, then you're playing as a group. You're going to have much better offensive output. And that's been an issue with the Eagles. Rarely have we seen them all in one piece. 1 week it's maybe Jeffrey is out. Okay, then he's back. Then Deshaun Jackson is out. Then he's back. Then maybe, Ertz is nursing something, or Goddard is nursing something. Sanders is out maybe with a shoulder or dinged up a little bit, maybe within the game or something like that. So you don't see the full offense out there consistently each and every week as you do with some teams. And, that's what happens when you have explosive offenses. A lot of times the guys just out there consistently. Think about the Rams back when, they had Gurley out there and Brandon Cooks and Woods and Cooper Kupp. All of those guys were on the field consistently. You saw the best version of Jared Goff, and they ended up getting to a Super Bowl. The Eagles, to me, have the names on paper. We've seen them produce at times out there individually on the field. But if they can get those guys to play for full 16, then you can start to talk about the Eagles' offense being one of the better offenses in the NFL.
Emery, let me ask you about a few other teams around the NFL. Let's stay in the NFC East first with the Cowboys. One of my concerns with the Cowboys is the fact that there's no more Travis Frederick there. You got a brand new guy coming into center. How much is that going to be an issue for the Cowboys in 2020, is the fact that you're bringing in a brand new anchor guy in the middle of that line?
It can be an issue, especially since we're in the COVID-19 era where you didn't have those OTAs, rookie mini camps. But I do like Tyler Beatis of Wisconsin. He was my number one center in the draft. So I think they can go from Travis Frederick to Beatis and be just fine. I think their offense, to me, is probably the best in the NFC East.
Todd Gurley is now in Atlanta. I think that he's potentially an upgrade over Devonta Freeman, but what can we actually expect from Gurley at this point in his career?
But you just hope he's healthy. And, that's the thing, because we hadn't seen him healthy in the last couple of years. A healthy Todd Gurley really transforms that offense playing on that turf because they have explosive weapons out there on the perimeter. They have a guy at tight end now in Hayden Hurst that can really be a good catch and run guy. And their offensive line should be better, especially on the right side with those rookies that are now going to be in their second year, and Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry. So I think if he's healthy, that could be an offense to keep an eye on in the NFC.
When you look at also in the NFC South, we know about Tom Brady. But how do the other pieces fit together? Because you're adding Gronk to an already deep tight end group with Brate and Howard. We have Evans, you have Godwin. You got a lot of parts there. So how are all those pieces you think going to fit together in Tampa?
I think they're going to fit together really well. My concern would be, which Tom Brady are you going to get? Are you going to get the one we saw last year? Because that's not a very good quarterback. And we don't even know what Rob Gronkowski can play like after being away for a year and losing all that weight. We don't know what that Gronk looks like. Will he still be able to block like he did when he was in his heyday? And can he still run like he did back in 2018? So again, there's a lot of unknowns there with Tampa Bay. On paper, it looks great. Do they have the running game now? I know they added Keyshawn Vaughn out of Vanderbilt. Ronald Jones, from the videos he's posted online, he's bulked up a bit, but what does that look like? So there's still some unknowns there, but on paper, you still can be excited about what they bring to the table. They weren't a bad team last year. Jameis just couldn't stop turning the ball over, but you saw what he did when he didn't turn the ball over. It threw for over 5,000 yards and 30-plus touchdowns.
Speaking of unknowns, it feels like the entire NFC North is full of unknowns. You no Stephon Diggs anymore in Minnesota. Aaron Rodgers, they really didn't do much of anything to improve the offense around in this offseason. Okay, you bring in Nick Foles to Chicago, but I'm not fully sure how much that fixes certain other problems. And then Detroit just feels like as long as Matthew Stafford is healthy, they have a chance. So who really is the better constructed offense in the NFC North?
I think each one of those teams brings something different to the table. Detroit's offense, I think, will be significantly better this year because they got DeAndre Swift out of Georgia, finally giving them a running back, a game breaker at the position since Barry Sanders. They haven't had that, and he is that type of back that can really help their offense out. Chicago has pieces on offense. They have explosive players. They just don't have the right quarterback. You look at Green Bay. They have long, angular receivers that can really get downfield, but it looks like they want to be a running team, which is why they invested heavily on the offensive line and also doubled down with what they did in drafting A.J. Dillon. So maybe there's a philosophy change going on. In Minnesota, they have good tight end depth. The offensive line played better last year. We know they have Dalvin Cook, an explosive running back in the backfield, and they got some good receivers despite losing Stephon Diggs, and Kirk Cousins played efficient football. So each one has a chance to be the best offense in the division. We just don't know which part of their weaknesses will become a strength this season.
We know one of the biggest stories of the offseason was DeAndre Hopkins going to Arizona. But did Arizona do enough with their offensive line to make up for some of the issues last year?
Well, you hope so. I mean, you bring in Marcus Gilbert. You draft Josh Jones out of Houston. You got some guys that you had last year that should develop and play well, like Lamont Galliard out of Georgia and Josh Miles out of Oregon State. So you've made the effort, and so we'll see. That's the biggest thing. You wonder if they bring in J.R. Sweezy. They were able to get a good contract with DJ Humphries, so he's happy with his contract. So there's some reasons to believe that they did enough. But to me, it's up to Kyler Murray to do his part to not get himself sacked. I thought he took a lot of sacks last year that weren't on the offensive line.
Speaking of a quarterback, one more for you, Emory, that we always have questions about, I feel like, is Jared Goff. It feels like from year to year, we have these expectations of him to grow and develop, and sometimes you watch him in games, and one game he'll look like, man, he's really focused, and another game he looks lost. So what version of Jared Goff do we expect to see in 2020?
Well, I think what I think they're going to do offensively as far as running the football, they're going to probably take the ball out of Goff's hands. Last year he threw for over 4,600 yards, but threw 626 times. So that's not winning football if you have Jared Goff throwing that much. You want to get back to what he did back in 2017 when he threw for 477 yards, but that was in conjunction with a healthy Todd Gurley. So I think with what they're going to do with Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson, they're going to take the ball a little bit out of his hands, rely on that run game, allow him to operate off play action, and be a little bit more efficient, because that's when he played his best ball, which is when they got to the Super Bowl.
He is Emory.
2018.
Sorry, he is Emory Hunt. Follow him on Twitter, F-Ball Game Plan. Always great analysis on the NFL, college football, and everything else. Check out the YouTube channel. And as all guests, he appeared here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Emory, as always, great analysis. I love picking your mind on football. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Appreciate you having me, Josh. Stay safe.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to your text messages coming up next and wrap up the hour. 609-403-0973 is the text board right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
They have a plan, and obviously with Miles Sanders on the field, who's super explosive. One team source said to me last weekend, he's LaShawn McCoy, but more explosive without the shake and bake like LaShawn had. So that's kind of the way the Eagles see him.
That was Adam Kaplan yesterday on the Sports Bash, Football at 4 on 97.3 ESPN. This is the warm-up with Josh Hennig. Thanks again to Emory Hunt for joining us in the last segment. I always like trying to put in context a lot of the stuff that we talk about, because so many times we have conversations about players and athletes and stuff and teams and offenses. And, listen, I always enjoy when you guys text in at 609-403-0973. But I feel like, part of things that, myself and Mike Gill and all of us here at 97.3 ESPN, we're trying to bring you a little context on some of this stuff. And that's the great things of having guys like Adam Kaplan and the guys from InsideTheBurst.com on Football at 4, Emory Hunt there, here on the warm-up here on 97.3 ESPN. Listen, I think that we have this attitude at times that the Eagles are worse than they actually are. And part of it is because by nature, some people tend to be hypercritical of their team or of the Eagles or of certain setups of a team. And we forget that these guys are building a team away for a certain reason. I think that when you look at Miles Sanders, when you look at arguably the best tight end duo in the NFL, when you look at the fact that you have Rager and Deshaun Jackson and Greg Ward can complement the other players and other pieces on the offense, this potentially could be a replication or a better version of the 2017 team, just in a different way. Listen, it's been a couple years since the Eagles put up the kind of points they put up in 2017. And if the offense can put up that kind of offensive scoring output next year, then they have this year, then they have an opportunity to have the kind of run they did in 2017. And listen, we all can bring up, if they stay healthy. And you heard Emory himself say it multiple times about the fact that the big question with the Eagles is staying healthy. But you can say that about any team in any era, in any time. Football is a physical sport. And by the way, with no mini camps and no OTAs, who knows exactly how in shape some of these guys will come in. I'm not saying they're not professionals and they're not working out, but there's a difference between being in gym shape and being in athletic shape. Listen, I tell you this. I've been around a lot of gyms in my life, and I've been doing a lot of gyms, see a lot of dudes lifting and pushing weight and doing squats and doing bench press. And some of the guys who are lifting a lot of weight doesn't mean that they're athletically inclined. It just means they've developed their muscles to look really big. Every person who shows up in training camp may not be in football shape. In fact, I guarantee you that some of them won't be in football shape because this quarantine and this pandemic has limited a lot of people's options in recovering from injuries, in opportunities to work out, in opportunities to have certain access to certain facilities, certain opportunities. And some guys are just not going to be fully up to speed week 1 or week 2 of training camp for the NFL season. So we may not get the best version of any team in week 1 of the season. But what I can promise you, what I can tell you, is that the Eagles have an opportunity to be one of the better offenses in the NFL, and that's something worth hanging on to, hanging your hat on, and being excited about. Listen, we can talk about Andre Dillard. We can talk about Jalen Reagor. We can talk about J.J. Arcega-Whiteside until we're all blue in the face. But I tend to have a positive perspective on this Eagles team. And I think that this Eagles team has an incredible opportunity to be very good this upcoming season. And I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see what version of Miles Sanders we get in year 2, what Jalen Reagor can do in this offense, what a Deshaun Jackson, the best shape of his life, would actually look like out on the football field. I'm interested to see what Andre Dillard in year 2 looks like. I'm interested to see what another year of Dallas Goedert looks like.